You believe banks are the safest places in the world. Steel vaults, cameras, armed guards, military-grade security protocols. We deposit our savings there, convinced that our money is more protected than anywhere else. But what if I told you there's a financial institution that has been robbed more times than any other on the planet? A bank that, in 2 centuries of existence, has had its vault looted by kings, gangs, engineers, even by the very government that created it. And the most disturbing part? Those robberies didn't destroy the institution, they transformed it. Welcome to the story of Banco do Brasil, where every heist taught a lesson no audit ever could. What you're about to hear isn't about ordinary crime. It's about how one institution became the permanent target of an entire country, and how each attack revealed not the bank's fragility, but the growing sophistication of Brazilian organized crime. It's about tunnels dug for months beneath entire cities, simultaneous explosions coordinated like military operations, drones flying over police barracks while hostages were tied to cars as human shields. And at the center of this saga of violence and criminal ingenuity, one unsettling discovery: the robbers didn't destroy the banking system, they digitized it. Rio de Janeiro, October of 1808. On the muddy streets of Rua Direita today, known as 1 de Março, a crowd gathers to witness something unprecedented in the Americas. Dom João, Prince Regent of Portugal, exiled in Brazil during the Napoleonic Wars, has just signed the royal decree creating the continent's first issuing bank. Banco do Brasil is officially born not as a private institution but as a supplementary cash chest of the crown. Its notes would circulate as currency. Its gold would finance public works and the extravagant expenses of the exiled royal family. It was a bank, but it functioned as the personal treasury of a fleeing monarch. For 13 years, the institution operated in that gray zone between public and private. The crown deposited jewels and gold brought from Lisbon, guaranteeing backing for the notes issued. But it also withdrew those same assets whenever it needed to pay debts or fund campaigns. It was a vicious cycle where the bank functioned as an open vault for whoever held power. And then, in 1821, came what historians politely call an incident, but what, in practice, was the first great robbery of Banco do Brasil. Dom João VI, pressured by the liberal revolution in Portugal, decided to return to Lisbon and took with him almost all the gold and jewels deposited in the bank. What remained in Rio de Janeiro were unbacked notes, runaway inflation, and an institution technically insolvent. In 1829, the bank was liquidated. It didn't collapse due to mismanagement or a financial crisis. It was looted by the very monarch who created it. That corrupted origin would forever shape the public perception of Banco do Brasil. It wasn't an inviolable vault, but a target. And if the king could steal, why not others? That question would echo through the next 160 years in the minds of increasingly daring thieves. It didn't collapse due to mismanagement or a financial crisis. It was looted by the very monarch who created it. That corrupted origin would forever shape the public perception of Banco do Brasil. It wasn't an inviolable vault, but a target. And if the king could steal, why not others? That question would echo through the next 160 years in the minds of increasingly daring thieves. Japari, outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, 1960. It's the middle of the night when a gang led by the legendary Tião Medonho intercepts the payroll train of the Central Railway of Brazil. The convoy carries 27 million cruzeiros, the equivalent of the payroll for thousands of Banco do Brasil employees. The heist is violent, swift, cinematic, and it worked. The money vanished into Rio's favelas. 2 years later, Brazilian cinema released The Great Train Robbery. O Assalto ao Trem Pagador. Not glorifying crime, but showing the miserable lives of the robbers after the theft. It was a foreshadowing. Robbing banks in Brazil wasn't just crime. It was a cultural phenomenon, a mirror of the brutal inequality that cut across the nation. But that was only the beginning. The following decades would witness an escalation of sophistication that would turn robberies into feats of engineering. And the greatest of them happened far from Rio, in the heart of the Northeast. Fortaleza, August of 2005. For months, a team of criminals posing as landscapers rented a modest house just a few blocks from the Central Bank of Brazil. Neighbors saw them carrying gardening tools, soil bags, equipment. No one suspected that beneath that quiet house, 80 meters of tunnel were being dug toward the city's most heavily protected vault. Professional lighting, a ventilation system, concrete reinforcement. It wasn't a robbery, it was a criminal infrastructure project. On the weekend of August 6th, the team drilled through 1 meter and 10 centimeters of reinforced concrete and entered the vault. They took 160 million reais in notes scheduled for destruction. 160 million. It was, at that moment, the biggest bank robbery in Brazilian history. When authorities discovered it on Monday, the tunnel was empty, the criminals gone. Less than 10% of the money was ever recovered. The rest evaporated into organized crimes laundering networks. And the message was clear. If they could rob the central bank, Banco do Brasil was an easy target. 12 years later, in Sao Paulo, police uncovered something even more ambitious. October of 2017. A discreet industrial warehouse in the city's eastern zone. When authorities raided the site, they found the entrance to a 500-meter tunnel. 500. LED lighting, rails for moving earth, an internal communication system. 20 criminals had invested 4 million reais in that underground infrastructure. The target was a Banco do Brasil vault containing 1 billion reais. If they had succeeded, it would have been the biggest robbery in the world. 16 suspects were arrested, but the leader escaped. Investigators later discovered the same group had participated in other robberies in Paraguay. The network was transnational, but tunnels required time, investment, coordination, and Brazilian organized crime developed a faster, more brutal, more spectacular method. They called it the New Cangaço, a reference to the bandits of the 19th century Northeast, and it began terrorizing entire cities. Criciúma, Santa Catarina. December 1st, 2020. Just before midnight, 30 armed men storm the city. They blow up Banco do Brasil's branch with military-grade explosives. They set vehicles on fire to block streets. They take hostages and use them as human shields. The gunfire lasts nearly 2 hours. When the criminals flee, the streets are littered with banknotes dropped during the escape. Residents collect 810,000 reais before the police arrive. The next day, in Cameda, Pará, a riverside city deep in the Amazon, an identical attack occurs. More than 20 men, explosives, hostages, 1 civilian killed. 2 cities, thousands of kilometers apart, attacked in sequence. The coordination was unmistakable, but the climax would come 8 months later. Aracatuba, Sao Paulo countryside. Early morning of August 30th, 2021. 15 to 20 criminals, armed with drones, rifles, and explosives invade the city. It's not just a robbery, it's a temporary military occupation. They plant 20 explosive devices throughout the streets, block every exit, monitor police in real time with drones. They tie hostages to car hoods as human shields. They rob 3 banks simultaneously. 3 people die. When they flee, they leave behind a traumatized city and one certainty. Brazilian organized crime had reached a level of sophistication, rivaling international terrorist groups. Between 2018 and 2021, 1,396 bank branches were attacked in Brazil, nearly 1,400, most in small interior towns, where police presence was minimal and the vaults held just enough cash to justify the risk. Banco do Brasil, with the largest branch network in the country, was the favorite target. Each attack left entire towns without access to physical money for weeks, sometimes months. The branches were rebuilt, but the damage was already done. And then something unexpected happened. Something no banking security expert had predicted. The robberies began to decline. Not because police became more efficient, not because the criminals were caught, but because cash itself was disappearing. There's a perverse irony in Banco do Brasil's story. For 2 centuries, criminals tried to steal its money. They dug tunnels, blew up vaults, seized cities, killed people. And in the end, they discovered they were destroying their own target. Because every robbery pushed the population further away from physical cash. And the less physical cash existed, the less worthwhile it became to rob banks. Researchers from the Inter-American Development Bank studied this phenomenon and found something extraordinary. In cities attacked by bank robbers, the use of physical cash plummeted immediately. People unable to withdraw money for weeks, while branches were rebuilt, migrated to digital platforms. The number of transactions via Pix increased by about 9%. Adoption of digital banks grew between 13.8 and 18.6%. It was forced digitalization. Organized crime, unintentionally, was doing the work that bank marketing campaigns took years to achieve. Today, Banco do Brasil remains one of the country's largest financial institutions, but its vaults hold less and less physical money. Branches in small towns have been closed or turned into digital service centers. The spectacular robberies that once dominated headlines have dropped dramatically. Not because criminals gave up, but because the financial return no longer justifies the risk. A 500-meter tunnel costs millions and takes months to build. And in the end, the vault might contain only enough money to pay for the operation itself, with no real profit. The first command of the capital, the São Paulo-based criminal organization that coordinated many of those attacks, has already shifted its focus to more profitable crimes. International drug trafficking, arms smuggling, money laundering through cryptocurrencies. Bank robberies have become relics of the past, romanticized in movies and documentaries, but economically unviable in the digital age. And Banco do Brasil, the most robbed vault in the world, discovered that its best defense wasn't armed guards or next-generation safes. It was the obsolescence of money itself. There's a brutal lesson hidden in this story. For 2 centuries, every Banco do Brasil heist revealed not only the audacity of criminals, but the technological evolution of crime. From the king who looted his own treasury to the engineers who dug tunnels worthy of infrastructure projects, each generation of robbers forced the bank to adapt. And the final adaptation was radical. Eliminate the target. Turn money into data. Replace physical vaults with servers protected by encryption. But that victory carries an invisible cost, because by fully digitizing the financial system, we've created new kinds of heists. Hackers don't need to dig tunnels or blow up walls. They invade systems, steal data, hijack entire servers with ransomware. The vault has moved. It's now in the cloud, protected not by steel, but by lines of code. And the new generation of robbers doesn't wield rifles or explosives. They use keyboards and algorithms. Banco do Brasil survived 160 years of physical robberies. The question no one can yet answer is, will it survive the next 160 years of digital ones? Because history has taught us one thing: wherever there is money, there will be those who try to steal it. And the more sophisticated the protection, the more sophisticated the attack. The game never ends, it just changes arenas.